Mr. Danny Hoefelmann, welcome to the Rich Equation podcast, bro. So good to see you.
Great to see you, Ashish. Thank you for having me.
You know, we've been friends for almost a year now. Time flies. And I was really excited to see that you said yes to joining us today because you have a really interesting and rich life experience that brings you to who you are today and your business that you run, the Good in Media. And you also help other people and entrepreneurs, and you also as an entrepreneur, focus on building personal brands and through podcasting, but just generally building personal brands. So I'm really excited about today's conversation. I think we're going to go in all different fun places and provide a lot of great value. So just honored that you're here, man. Really, really appreciate it.
Super appreciative that you're here and super appreciative that you're building the platform that you are and like sharing people's stories and being able to honor other people on their journeys. Because I don't know, as a guy who's in the build process, it's really fun to hear and learn from people at different experience levels and different parts. So I appreciate you, man.
Well, let's just get right to it because you have such a beautiful and fresh perspective about how you operate today. But I know that came from perspective of a really dark time in your life. And I know you personally, and so we've been able to talk a little bit about that. But if you're comfortable, I'd like to understand sort of how you have come to where you are in your journey and what has sort of helped you build to that and manifest your mission.
Yeah. And I think a big thing is kind of taking a step back to see like, I've been married to my wife next year will be 15 years, but we've been dating for like 17 years. I'm only 33, but I have already about to be an 11 and 13-year-old. So I started the, quote, adult life very young. I was married at 19. And by the time I was like 25, on paper, everything was like fantastic. I had, good looking wife, 2 kids, cars, nice house, all the different things that they say, like have these things. And for whatever reason, I couldn't really figure out, I still found myself suicidal. And it was one of those things for me where it was like, well, I checked all the boxes. I did all the things that I was supposed to do. Like, why don't I feel anything really? Like, I think that was my thing, is I was just a very numb feeling. And I essentially was like, well, let me, change jobs. Maybe that will help me. And I quit my great corporate job and I went over to do, door-to-door sales because I had a few friends from high school that were doing it, killing it. And they were selling alarm systems. And I was like, fine, let me go do that. And long story short, after a summer of like trying to knock door to door while also being like suicidal and not telling anyone about it, it just tanked everything. And, when we came back to Arizona from being gone for the summer, we just didn't have anything to like keep us running. So I wound up kind of losing the house, losing cars, and I had to move my family in with my sister's family for all of 2016. And we had to move ourselves to Texas. And what it really did is it made me focus on like, okay, why am I like this? Like, what are these things? Because like right now, I can't imagine being in that mental headspace that I was. Because right now, I'm like, if I hit a problem like I was hitting, like, I don't know, I'll just find ways to get out of it. I'll go talk to people, I'll do things. But I think the biggest problem for me was I tried to keep everything a secret. Because I wanted to solve it myself. Like I wanted internally, like, no, I'll fix it. Then I'll like pay everyone back and like it'll be like this never happened. I'm like, that's not how it works, And I had a really
cool... You can't do it yourself. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you cannot do it yourself. Like you have to have a community of people around you who are encouraging you and helping you and allowing you to just talk about things and get it out. And I think I learned that I needed to talk about things while I was in Texas for that year of like just nothing really progressing in my life. But my wife and I found out I had a 401k account that I didn't even know from my previous job. And I was like, oh, cash that out. Like, we don't have income. Like, go ahead and do that. And it was only a few grand. But when that showed up, we'd been down in Texas for like 6 months. And essentially, I just told my wife, I was like, hey, let's just go on a date. We haven't done this in forever. And we went to, I don't know, like an Olive Garden. It wasn't anywhere fancy. It was just, we went on a date, took a selfie, posted it on Facebook. And someone said, hey, man, your life is perfect. And I was just like, you have no clue, because the outside world had no clue, And essentially someone calling my life perfect while I knew where I actually was hit me so hard that I just told my wife and my sister and everyone else in the house, I was like, hey, just leave me alone. I'm going to go in here and do a Facebook Live. But I'd never done one before. And I basically did like I don't know, it was 5-7 minutes of just letting people know where we were and letting people know that like you're seeing a highlight reel. I'm not posting all the downside. You're not seeing all the struggles, and you don't know that like I'm actually suicidal, lost everything, and I'm living with my sister right now. And I was just open about all of it. And it was really cool because the response that came of that was not just people trying to encourage me to feel better, but it was a ton of people who said, I'm going through that too. And it gave permission to so many people to be open about, we're all struggling with things. And like social media doesn't show that stuff. Most personal brands don't talk about their negative parts. They just don't. And I think for me, it gave me an ability very quickly to be like, oh, as soon as I, ended that Facebook Live, I just sat there and breathed, and it just, so much weight was off my shoulders because I was like, there's no hiding anymore. Nothing is, nothing is a secret. And it was incredibly empowering to me. And it was just a realization that like, okay, I need to talk about this. And then one more thing happened while I was down there is a couple months after that, I had a cousin commit suicide. And I was one of the first people to find out because he happened to live next door to my in-laws. And I called my mom, I confirmed, and I was like, is this really happening? And it threw me off because my cousin was essentially like Robin Williams. Like, he was the life of the party. He was the funny guy. Everyone in Southern Utah knew him, and still he took his own life. And I once again told everyone, just leave me alone for a minute. Like, let me just go like get some thoughts out. And I wrote a post basically saying, I'm watching his Facebook feed fill up with all these positive memories and things that people loved him for. Why do we wait until someone passes on to share those things? Like, why don't we just send a text the moment we have a thought that like, hey, remember that time we went and did this thing? I still love that memory. Hope you're good. Small thing, doesn't have to be huge. And it was the first time that I saw that like my one voice could do a lot. I don't care about the numbers, but it got shared in everything more than I ever thought it would. And I had churches from different parts of the country reaching out saying, we read this to our congregation. Thank you for this.
Wow.
It was the first time that I ever had anything like realizing that like, because I was speaking from the standpoint of someone who was suicidal and who was currently going through depression, and I was able to actually like put these feelings into words and go, it related to so many people that I really came out of that understanding that like, I need to be someone who speaks about this. And not only did it relieve things from my shoulders, but when I helped other people, I actually just felt better doing it. So a lot of my journey is rooted in that mental health struggle and being someone who can help people through that now. And that's what my company comes from is.
Well, before we pivot to the where you are now, actually, I want to run off of that for a minute, because I think that you had to experience loss in order to realize that I am unhappy or something in my life I need to address or what have you. I experience that people that have things are also unhappy. So, this lack of listening to your heart, lack of knowing what you want, what fulfills you, even whether you have it, you're in that quote unquote have, or you lose. I think people still experience this lack of fulfillment, or perhaps it's a lack of purpose or mission. And which is why I talk about on this podcast about what does it mean to be rich? Because even whether you're poor financially or lifestyle wise, or rich financially or lifestyle wise, I'm more interested in asking the question and being inquisitive about what's going on, and am I showing up the right way with what I'm doing in my life, than am I getting some material results that everyone tells me that I'm supposed to have, like you talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. So I love that journey, but I also, I want to remind people that, it does serve us to talk about this more publicly, not because we're trying to hide something, but because there are more people than not suffering through these things. And so I just appreciate you sharing that. So now what did you learn from that, and how did you pivot from there?
Yeah. And I think basically we had to get fed up with it. My wife as well,
right.
Because I had an incredible ability to say like, could be worse. Like, I'm not actually homeless, like could be worse. And it allowed me to prolong just skidding along rock bottom. And I think that's some of us let that happen, and it doesn't need to happen. But I think I needed to see other people who had been in a similar situation who made it out. And it started with me just going to the local library and renting like audiobooks and stuff. And I was hearing these stories of cool people. And then I really got into podcasts around that time. And I was hearing these leaders of different things tell similar stories to mine. And I was like, oh, like that guy was here and now look where he is. Maybe I could do that. So having that little semblance of hope was a big thing. And then when you have two families living in the same house, especially when one is not supporting the other, like my only goal was to be the best uncle possible. You know, if I can make the house, you know, run a little better, be those things, I'm a little less of a burden. But I wasn't a functioning person out in like normal world. Mm-hmm. And I think to me, again, I prolonged that more than I needed to. But at one point, my wife and I said, okay, like this isn't working anymore. Like if we're going to continue, you know, living our life, like we have to get back to Arizona. We have to be living on our own and we have to be sustainable. What that meant for us was the team that I was selling with, the door-to-door alarm company, was starting a team back in Phoenix. They never had one before. And I was like, I'll just go back with them, you know? And essentially like the team had a love-hate relationship with me because I understood enough things in the personal growth world. I understood sales. I understood all that stuff. But I was either like MVP of the day or I was like a cancer to the team. And I had to make a decision like, okay, if I'm going to come out there, I promise you I'll be MVP while I'm here. Like, I'm not. Why
were you sometimes a cancer? Because you knew too much? I don't understand.
No, simply because I would hit these like really low mental funks where I just had no belief in myself. And I think that was really what it came down to is I just didn't believe that I could. And then I'd have other days where it'd be like, okay, I'm leading the team. Like I have more sales than anyone. And, you know, I could have a great attitude. But when I was in my lowest times, like I literally just had, I don't know if apathetic is the right word, where you just don't care, you don't feel. But I would have those moments where it was like, I would rather just go sit at a Burger King than go door to door right now. Or like go do these different things. And it was just like, I don't know, I became a negative influence because either way, I'm an influential person typically if I'm in the group. Like I have the ability to just talk and do these things, but is it a good influence or a bad influence? And when I became a bad influence, I kind of wanted to remove myself from it too, because I didn't want to be that for the team. Like I want the best for the team, you know? So my wife and I decided that I was going to move back to Arizona, and I came out here for 2 months alone. And essentially I just had to work. And that was kind of that, like, we waited until I got to do Halloween with my kids. And then November 1st of 2016, I had to drive back here on my own. And there was no like, we'll see you in so many days. It was like, we'll see you when you earn getting us back, period. So if you can do it in 30 days, we'll see you in 30 days. If you can do it in 3 months, I guess we'll see you in 3 months. But it very much had to put myself in a, you have no other option scenario. And like, bless my wife, she's the most patient person.
Burn the ships.
Yeah. And she's the most patient person that exists. She loved me through all of it. And, you know, she took a job working back in Houston to help, you know, give us a base while I was out doing something on all commissions. And it took us till a few days before Christmas. And then I got everyone back. And so we were almost 2 months, but it was that burn the ships, you have no other option that brought us there. And I think one of the big things that I really took away from that whole thing, well, there's really two things. And one is that, like, no matter how bad a day is, like, there's always some good in it. Always. Like, the second piece of that is too many people let a bad moment ruin their whole day. And I think I needed to learn that lesson, because now it doesn't matter what's going on or how bad something gets. I typically have the ability to look at it and be like, okay, well, there's the silver lining. So there's some good in it. And even if this bad thing happened, like, all right, well, it's only 2 o'clock. So up till 2 o'clock might have sucked, but I'm going to make the next half the day, like, we'll be okay. You know, I still get to go hang out with my family. I still get to do the things that I want to do. We'll get through that. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaways that I took from that period.
So then you built Good in Media, and you can share your mission at Good in Media, but also we talk about influence. You literally are in the business of helping other people expand their influence. Talk about that.
Well, I think having a podcast at this point, again, I was passionate about it because it was one of the things that got me out of my funk. Mm-hmm. You know, I saw the power in being able to tell your story and tell other people's stories so that people can just see themselves. And I think that was why I loved doing this. And I helped start a different media company. I was there for about 2 years. And then I became the good in media when I left that company. And my big thing was I only want to work with people who are in some version of the personal growth space. That can be finance, that can be business, that can be health, whatever that is. If your mission is to help people empower, like become the higher version of themselves, like the more empowered, more intelligent, like healthier, whatever that is. Are you helping someone in personal growth? We wanted to work with people because I understood that like I see not only podcasting as like the best networking tool that exists right now, because like, Ashish, I know you're busy. I can't just ask you to coffee on a random whim. But if I say, hey, I absolutely love the work you're doing with this, and I love the work you're doing with this, it's aligned with our mission and the people that we speak to in our audience, are you open to having a conversation and allowing us to feature you? More than not, I'm going to get a better response from that than just saying like, hey, you who's running multiple businesses and has a family and has these things, like, can I pick your brain? It just doesn't work that way anymore. So I think podcasts are incredibly helpful if you are someone trying to build a group, like a sphere of influence, a community, that's all there. But really, I think we have the ability to impact so many more people than if we just kept it in. I love the ability to tell stories, and I love the ability to gain trust with people over time, because I don't get to spend a lot of time with you, Ashish. I've got to be at one event with you, but I've heard you talk to a lot of people, and I feel like I know you a lot better than I ever would have, which means even if chaos happens and some rumor is spread about Ashish, I feel like I know you already. And I'm like, no, that's not his character. You know, I think you'll see a lot of that in today's branding world. Like there are a lot of podcast hosts who have, quote, been canceled, you know, but they have such a backlog and they have such a history with the people who listen to them that people are like, I don't know about that. And it winds up being the thing that like you couldn't pay a PR company to save their career more than just having this ongoing relationship with their followers. That's the biggest thing with it to me. So I think that's a helpful tool for anyone who's aspiring to be a leader, is just understand that like no matter what's going on, no matter what platforms come and go and everything will go, when you've built an audience and you've built followers who want to be along with your story and you're open about it, you're not just making the perfect life, you're not making like you don't make mistakes, you're being honest in your journey. It brings people along with you. And like I'm sure you've heard the concept of like the 1,000 true fans and things like that. I think that's incredibly important for podcasts, is understanding that like if you have 1,000 people who buy into everything you do and support all of these things, you'll never be broke. Like it's you have people who are there with you. So I think that's why like my business went into podcasting was A, it helped me and when I needed it. B, I wanted to be that for other people. And C, I just saw it as a networking tool that also allowed people to just solidify their brand as like who they are.
I love that. I mean, you know, for me, I'm so into this personal growth stuff, but it selfishly allows me to talk to people, hear their stories. And I'll admit that sometimes when I'm struggling or I'm having an off day, I actually go back to my podcast with people that potentially, you know, that I had great conversations with or that inspire me. And I'll re-listen and hear the conversation in a completely different way and get motivation, inspiration, perhaps humility, whatever it is that I'm, you know, perhaps needing. And, you know, I don't really know what I'm going to do with this quote unquote personal brand. And you see people trying to build personal brands and building a following and all those things. But for me, what I was starting with was just, let's get these conversations in public. Let's press record and let people hear it. You know, what common themes do you see with entrepreneurs that actually try to build a personal brand and fail?
I think too many people try to outsource everything quickly. You know, those who have the ability to typically are saying, okay, let me just invest in this and these people will do it for me. And I think the hardest thing with a personal brand is you can't outsource you. And I think there's a level of, you can create content ahead of time. You can create content that other people can post for you. You can do all these different things, but ultimately, like, you can have this perfectly curated feed, but like, you're still best off to show up in the stories as yourself, raw, like not necessarily this edited, produced thing, because now I get to see who you are. Like, I get to see a peek into your day-to-day life. And I think that to so many people is, again, like, you can have this perfect feed, but that doesn't tell me who you are. Again, that's the highlight reel of everything else going on. But if you're doing even just like 3 to 5 stories a day, where you're just like, here's me walking my dog, or here's me, like, I walked over to the pier because I wanted to see the ocean, or whatever your thing is, it still lets people know a little bit more about you, the person, not you, the influencer, not you, the entrepreneur. Like, we're at a day and age where everyone wants to know who's the CEO of the company. Are they a jerk? Because if so, I'm probably not supporting that company. And I think we're seeing that all around. Like, I think you're seeing way more public influence, even from traditional corporate places, because we want to know if we trust the person at the top. Because if we trust the person at the top, typically we trust everything on the way down. So I think there's, again, on the smaller scale, when you're not looking at big corporate, I think I'm seeing a lot of people who want to start brands and do these things. And the biggest thing that I struggle with is, like, I can help you create and produce these beautiful sounding podcasts. I can help you create all the content, but if you don't post it, that's a thing. You know, sometimes that we have people that will create incredible content for, but like, they won't post it for 4 weeks. And I'm like, hey, you can't complain that your stuff isn't working if you don't tell people that it exists, you know? And I think people just need to take a little bit of ownership, even if they are outsourcing things, to say, okay, like, still my brand. Like, I have to be the one to show up and like make it work, because I don't know, like, I don't relate to brands that I can tell everything's curated and I never get to hear from them. And like, also, if you have genuine people in your comments, there's a lot of bots right now, so you got to ignore those ones. But if you have genuine people in your comment section, go reply to them. Go reply. Start a communication. That's the whole point of this, is you're trying to expand your network. Not much actually expands your network, like actually engaging with those people who have showed gratitude for what you put out there. So respond to them.
I think one of the things that shows up for me as you speak about all this is that I think people often think that it is just you're just putting up a front of like everything is pretty, and like you experienced this, right? When you posted your picture at Olive Garden on a date, it's like, how can we show up more authentically? For me, the way I show up authentically is my podcast. Like, you can see one post on Instagram perhaps, but if you really want to know who I am, you listen to 4 or 5 podcasts, you see me talk, you see who I'm interviewing with, you see my stories or what I relate to or whatever. But how can we stay aligned with being authentic in this endeavor of building a personal brand?
Yeah. Again, I think it all goes back to just being open about the imperfections of things. And I don't think everyone has to bear it all and be like, oh, I'm going through all these things. Yeah. Like, I think we're
doesn't always have to be negative.
I think the pendulum has swung to where people are talking about, like, I worry about talking too much about mental health because I don't want to just be the mental health guy. There's a lot of other aspects to my thing, but also it's hard to tell my story without acknowledging that this is where I've been, you know? But I think we're swaying to a society where everyone is basically wearing these traumas that they've been through, whether you'd actually consider them traumas or not. They're wearing them as badges. And it's like, okay. Like, I think we also need to make sure we're paying attention to language and how we're saying these things, because not everything is equal. Like when people say like, hey, I'm going through depression, someone who's truly suicidal is going through depression, and someone who's just having an off day is also going through depression. They're both valid, but that's such a huge spectrum there. And I think it's one of those things where, like, if we can just be more open about the fact that, like, not everything is perfect, but like also, excuse me, for the most part, it's like, here's the good things going on in my world though.
Yeah.
But like, not everything is always this, you know. I think it's less about needing to be perfect or totally quote authentic, where everything is just bare it all, but really just whoever you are, be that person 24/7. I don't care if you're on a podcast, I don't care if you're on social media, whatever that is. Like, if you cannot have to shift into, I'm the podcast host now, and then over here it's like, I'm the person who shows up with all the energy on social media, but then in real life you're like, ooh, like, I can't be that guy. Like, I've
not
learned
sustainable.
No, you can't. And I've just learned that, like, I have to be the exact same demeanor at all times. And sometimes that's higher, sometimes that's lower. Like, it gets there, but for the most part, it doesn't matter if I'm on a show with you or if I'm actually meeting with a client doing a sales presentation, whatever it is. I'm going to be the same person, because for a long time in my life, I tried to like live two lives where like everyone thought I was this, but I'm actually this. And it's not sustainable. And honestly, I think it makes things worse. I think it makes it a lot harder on you than it needs to be.
You help other people build personal brands. You're also building a personal brand and you're a business owner. Tell me a little bit about what you're dealing with as you scale and grow your business right now. What are some of the challenges that you're experiencing?
I think the biggest thing for me is I've never focused on me. You know, I think I put so much time and energy into building other people's brands. And up until very recently, like I'm just now hitting the point where I'm scaling myself out of doing editing. You know, it's one of those things where I've been so involved in so many things that I'm the guy who runs a podcast company and preaches everyone should have a podcast. Meanwhile, like my podcast hasn't posted in 6 months. And like, that's a problem. You know, like I can't be the guy who totally preaches like this is the best networking tool and not show people like, hey, here's how it works. Not to mention, I need to take time to be figuring out all the new strategies and all the things that people are doing and figure out those growth things. The best test dummy is me, not necessarily my clients. To them, I'm only doing the things that I know are working. And I think it's a thing I'm excited about right now, because with me stepping back from all these other things and actually empowering the team below me to like, hey, you guys wanted to do this stuff, like rock it. Like I trust you. I think that's my biggest thing is I've had a hard time trusting that things will be done and trusting that like, yeah, as I free up my time and I put myself in these positions of networking and doing all these different things, the money to pay those guys will come. That's not going to be a problem, but I have to trust that. And then I have to remember like, okay, I freed up this time, not so that I could be the owner that doesn't do anything. I freed up this time so I could put that towards other things that are more productive that'll help us scale and grow. That's the biggest things I'm learning right now. And I don't know. I think that's probably the biggest things that I'm working towards. Like I mentioned to you just before the call, like August will be 3 years in business as The Good in Media. And I'm just now stepping back and saying, okay, let me at least bring in like a fractional CFO to give me a big picture plan to say, okay, here's what we're going to do and here's the steps. We're excited about that. So it's my biggest scary challenge, but also it's the thing I'm most excited about right now.
So what commitment are you making right here live with everybody that you're going to focus on in the next 90 days?
90 days? So today, it's almost the end of June here. So for me, I'll say by the end of July, my personal podcast will be live, The Good in Today. So it's already technically live, but you will have new episodes coming out. So that'll be by the end of July. And then in that 90 days, I'll commit to, we're going to have daily content going out, which on my end is going to be a personal brand of me talking about mental health, talking about the different things that are important to me, but also within The Good in Media. I can't work with everyone. Not everyone has the budget to hire a team and do these different things, but I want to create content because I believe in podcasting and I want more people to have them. So I want to create content that teaches people how to do some things themselves. So I want those things to be going out too. So that's my commitment, is to put more things out for us, because A, I know it'll help us grow, but B, like I'll grow as a person, and it's just the one thing that has been lacking.
I love it. I'll check in with you 90 days and remember this is recorded, so it's all good.
I appreciate that.
You know, what's really interesting too about this whole podcasting thing is that it's still a pretty, and you can validate or disagree with me, but it seems to be still a very young medium.
It is.
I mean, I didn't really look into the stats and all that stuff and all the technicals, the analytics and what exists out there in podcasting, but it's very immature market. It's a very young market. Yes, there are thousands and thousands of podcasts, but when you compare them to blogs or newsletters or other forms of media, like even Spotify channels, like it's such a young medium in which people communicate. I think it's really fascinating.
Well, and it's been around for 10 plus years, but it's really, I'd say, only the last 3 to 5 that they're starting to pick up. And it's even kind of like a joke at this point. Like, yes, everyone has a podcast, but I think it's not reality, first of all. And then like, I was looking at the insights the other day, and it says that there's over 2.4 million podcasts available on Apple right now. But if you look at the insights in the last 90 days, only 20% of those, just a little over 400,000, have actually posted an episode. So yes, there's a bunch that exist, but are they actually posting? No. So your active pool of people that you're going, quote, against, it's it's not half as big as you think.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I just don't think it matters. Like, this is one of those things. This isn't like a zero-sum game. This is an abundance thing. Like, there are people out there that only Ashish can reach, only Danny can reach. And the people that relate to me might not relate to you, and vice versa. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned is, have you ever heard of JP Sears? He's gone very political. He's the redhead comedian guy who he used to do all these like parody skits of things. Now it's mainly political, but I had him on a podcast 3 or 4 years ago, and we asked him what's more important, the message or the messenger? And he basically just said, like, without a doubt, it's the messenger. There's not a single thing you're going to say that hasn't been said by someone in the past. It's all been said, but it's not been said by you. And that hit me because it was one of those things where it was like my unique life experience gives me the ability to connect to people that you might not have the ability to connect to. And I think that's true with all hosts of podcasts too. You may have 10 podcasts that are all talking about the exact same thing, but they're each going to find an audience that relates to them and not the other person, and they're still going to choose them. That's the big thing to me is, again, you're back to that, like, I don't need everyone to get millions of downloads. If you have 1,000 people who follow each of you, you probably have the ability to make yourself a living and take care of yourself. Because I also think one mistake that I see a lot of podcast people make is they're so quick to say, what can I do to grow so that I can get advertisers to like be on my podcast?
People try to monetize immediately.
It's immediate.
Yeah,
but it's also
how the world is sometimes.
Well, and it's also trying to monetize by way of saying like, hey, I'm going to get a MeUndies ad. And what does that have to do with your
That's
podcast?
Right. It means nothing to do with your audience.
And you're going to get maybe a small fraction of each order. The people that I look at that are most successful with podcasting monetize themselves. Meaning, if they are a consultant or a coach, or they have a podcast, or not a podcast, but if they have a course on whatever it is that they teach, that's the ad. It's always themselves. It's always, if you got value from this and you want more and you relate to me, I offer this thing. This is a way that you can support me for the free conversations that I give out every single week.
Yeah,
that is how you monetize podcasting. It's not meant to be, in my opinion, just go find all the random people that you can just slap in the middle of your conversation, because I think it screws up the flow, especially if it's not you. There's nothing wrong with a mid-roll ad, but I think it goes a lot farther if it's you talking about ways people can support you. They already like you. They're there for you.
Right.
So I think that's a big thing.
Let me ask you a question about you and your routine. For you to continue to show up this way and perform, what does your daily routine look like?
I won't say the routine is dialed at this point, but I know a couple things that I have to do. So as of right now, like, I'm 39 days into 75 hard. And it's one of those things where I just recognize that, well, there's a kind of a bet that happened that means I have to do this. Otherwise I'm going to have a real problem. But essentially I need a discipline, and like, you and I went to Kyle Depius's event, and most of us, when we left, we had to make commitments. And if we didn't keep them, what was your consequence? A year ago, I went to Kyle's event, and the goal was I had to lose 60 pounds between events. I lost 40 pounds, and essentially I didn't do it in a healthy way. By the last few weeks, I was basically in like a UFC weight cut trying to get down, and it just failed. And what that was my consequence then was I had to put out there my picture before and after. I had to put the photo up saying like, hey, here's me with my shirt off, here's how far I've come, but I'm still a 300 plus pound guy, and essentially that was my downfall. So I'm in a mastermind right now, and we started a few months ago, but by August 3rd, we meet again, and I had to lose 40 pounds from where I was to where I got to get to. Excuse me. If I don't hit it, the dumbest thing we could think of as a consequence for me that actually motivated me was I have to get my belly button pierced. So I have till August 3rd to get down to 287. And it's one of those things where it's like, I had said I'll shave my beard. And my wife was like, no.
That's not, like, that's painful enough.
I mean, it's pretty painful because as a big fella, this is my jawline right now, so I would like to have my beard, but she was like, nah, what if you did this? And it was the dumbest thing that I could think of. And I was like, yeah, I don't want that. So, I mean, this morning I jumped on the scale, and it was the first time I saw 299.6. It's the first time I've seen under 300 in 8 years.
Good for you, brother. Good for you.
I'm on track. I've got about 40 days ish to lose another 13 pounds, I think is what I need to do.
Good
So
for you.
I'm on track, but I need that discipline. Long roundabout way to say I have to go on a walk every morning because it's the way that I clear my mind. And then I have to spend a little bit of time with my kids because for me, like, I want that focus of like, why am I doing all this? Like, why am I trying to build a life that requires me to work weird hours and do all these different things? Because one day I'll be able to control everything in my world. So I have to go on the walk. I have to get that clarity. I have to spend some time with my kids, and I have to spend a little bit of time with my wife, separate of her and I having work meetings, because she's the co-founder of this business. So she's now home with me. She's been home for 2 years, but it's those three things have to happen before anything else can happen. And like, that's kind of my keys to like,
Love it.
I set my day up for success.
And as we wrap up, I want to ask you your final question is for you. What does it mean to live a rich life?
I was thinking about this because I'm kind of developing my own theory right now. And I understand the monetary side, and anyone who tells you like it's nothing to do with the finances probably has their finances enough in order that they don't have to worry about it. So I think having some level of comfort in there makes sense. Just meaning like if you are at a place where you can put all your bills on auto pay and just not worried, you know they're going to go, you're good. But I think the biggest thing for me that I've been thinking about is since I've been doing 75 hard, I've just realized that like, I'm keeping promises to myself. Therefore, I'm proud of myself. And it's easier to wake up and get things done when you're proud of yourself. And I think that's a big, I'm still fleshing out what this really means in my head, but I don't think you can live a rich life where you're fulfilled and happy and like feeling joy if you're not proud of yourself. Because for me, that was for the longest time when I went through my deepest, darkest things, I wasn't proud of me. I wasn't accomplishing things. I wasn't keeping promises to myself. And that led me to ballooning from around 200 pounds to almost 350 pounds. I wasn't keeping commitments to myself. I wasn't doing the things that mattered to be a good dad, to be a good husband. Right now, and I can say for the last few months minimum, I've been doing all of those things pretty well. And like right now I'm in a place where I'm like, I am feeling more joy. I think happiness is a hard thing to define, but I'm feeling more joy than I have in a long time. And I'm having fun doing the things I want to do and like need to do, simply because I feel like I'm proud of me. So I think in order to truly live a rich life, you need to figure out what are those commitments you need to make to yourself and make sure that you're doing them. Because if you're proud of yourself, you do everything else with more purpose.
Mic drop. Dude, I'm proud of you, bro.
I appreciate you.
I really thank you for joining us today. If anyone wants to, and for the record, I do not work with Danny and on our podcast. So if you are interested in exploring the idea of building a personal brand or launching your podcast, reach out to The Good in Media. We'll put all of Danny's socials in the show notes, and when we post it on social media, he'll also be tagged. But thanks so much, brother, and so good to see you, and congratulations on everything, and thanks for dropping so much heat today.
Thank you. And again, I just want to honor you, man. I appreciate the work you're doing and the content that you're putting out, because I know you're impacting more people than you realize too. So genuinely, I appreciate you, Ashish.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.